Okay, everyone, welcome to another episode of The Accidental Entrepreneur. I'm Mitch Beinhacker. Got a special guest from the West Coast. We're on the East Coast today, so about a 3-hour difference here. And if you are listening on your favorite podcast directory, be sure and give us a 5-star review wherever possible. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe to the feed so you can keep getting good information and we can keep bringing good content like the conversation we're having today. So I want to welcome my guest today, Brant Cooper. Brant is correct me if I'm wrong, Brant, but you're not only an entrepreneur and you work in corporate America, but you're also an author. We're going to put links to your books in the show notes. And maybe you want to introduce yourself and we'll talk about your background and your training and, you know, your whole journey to where you got today. And then we can share all the good thoughts for entrepreneurs and things that I'm sure you have a lot of good advice.
Thanks, Mitch. Thanks, Mitch, for having me. It's a great title of a podcast because I am an accidental entrepreneur.
Yeah,
I've sort of never considered myself an entrepreneur. Seriously, it's.
I know you don't know how many people say that, and it's true.
Yeah, it's true. I always thought, coming out of college, I think that there was, the startup scene wasn't that well known yet. There were companies like HP and Intel that were doing very well, but it wasn't sort of hip. I don't think startups became hip until the mid to late 90s,
right,
maybe
when the word founder became like a real word,
right.
Yeah.
Suddenly we put that into all of
like
our
founders,
bios, right?
Oh, I'm a founder. Like, really? Yeah, it's funny, but it's true.
Yeah, so I always thought that the entrepreneur was the one with the big idea, like the visionary, and you get the eureka moment, and
right, but that's very, very, very rare.
It's very rare. I call it the myth of the visionary. It's not how businesses typically start up and succeed. So, I love the accidental entrepreneur because guess what? We all have to be entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
And that's really sort of what I discovered along my journey. I got a job after college like everybody else does. And I used to sit on the front stoop of my little craftsman house in the Washington, D.C. area and go like, really? Okay, this is the rest of my life. It's 9 to 5.
I mean,
this is what
we
I'm
didn't
doing.
know any better, right? We just were told that's what you do. So, yeah.
Right. So after a year of that, though, I dropped out and went and wrote the Great American Novel, which was definitely American, but not great. And, but it was that first, I'm not going to do it the way everybody else is doing it.
Right.
And that was super empowering because it sort of takes a confidence or a faith in yourself that you're going to be able to go figure it out. You're going to be able to take care of your own economy.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of people that don't do that. Or if they do it like 20 years later, not a year later.
Right.
So, a lot of more power to it.
And then there's other people that for whatever reason are willing to take that dive right away and multiple times. And so, so that wasn't me. I had to, so then, what was interesting about that is that it allowed me to go back into the job force, the workforce, but knowing that I could leave at any time. And I kind of joke that the first couple of jobs I had when I went back into the workforce after the failure of getting the book published, my managers were sort of passed me around like a hot potato because nobody wanted to manage me. And maybe it was because I was a bad employee, or maybe it was because I wanted to do things my own way. And
so you were difficult to manage. Like you didn't follow what they told you to do. You're like, I'm going to figure it out a better way. Yeah. Okay. Right. That's what young people do.
It's what young people do. And also it's what most companies hate. Right.
Yeah.
And so they didn't like it. So it was then in the late 90s that I joined my first startup. And that, again, was sort of my second epiphany, maybe, was that, wow, there actually are companies that want you to go do it your way, that they want you to figure it out, that they're not going to sit on top of you and tell you how to do it. Your job is to go drive impact in the business however you can. Yeah. And you have to go do it. And so that was, to me, what I consider a key part of what I call the entrepreneurial spirit. So I wasn't the founder of that company, but all of the early employees had to have that entrepreneurial spirit. So even if they weren't ready to take the leap to go start their own business and risk all of their money and all of that,
not a lot of people want.
They exhibited the spirit of, I'm going to go figure out how to drive impact in the business. And so that's really what's driven my career since the late 90s, is writing about that, teaching it to other people, learning, continuing to learn how to do it, how to do it inside of big businesses.
Yeah.
And, it's a little bit of tilting at windmills perhaps, but it's an exciting way to work, and it's fun and rewarding when it actually happens.
Brant, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you disagree, that's completely okay. I think there's a lot of larger corporations, maybe not enormous corporations, but there's a lot of larger corporations that when you really, sit down and you talk to the management, they want people to be more entrepreneurial, but they either don't know how to do it, or they're afraid what the ramifications are, or they got these wild people that aren't going to listen and all these types of stuff. So they want the result of people being, self-driven and motivated and innovative and all these types of things, but they're afraid to let the horse out of the barn. I think if you look at the pandemic, and all the work from home stuff, I think there were a lot of corporations that were very reluctant to do that. But now that they see the productivity that they get out of their employees and how it's affected quality of life, as a matter of fact, I think we're working harder than we were before when we had to go to an office, because we had, we're only in the office, then you get to decompress coming home and whatever. Now you can go home, do something. They got to jump on a call at 8:00 at night. So I think that now, I think maybe they got to give it a try, but I think that's the reluctance. If maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think you're spot on. I mean, I think that especially in this digital world that we live in, everybody sort of recognizes that the world has changed. The pandemic really drove it home. It was happening before the pandemic.
Right. But
the pandemic really drove it home.
Yeah.
Right. And all the most successful companies during the pandemic tended to be digital companies.
Yeah.
And I've got some case studies in my last book, Disruption Proof.
Yeah, well, they were prepared for it, really, right?
Right. The ones that were prepared for whatever disruption might happen are the ones that then were able to respond. And a lot of that is then, what I've been teaching. It's this agility and understanding customers deeply, not just asking them for feature requirements and running experiments and doing all of these things in what I call the exploration mode, which is you admit that you don't know. So the pandemic hits and you admit that you don't know how to serve your market anymore because the budgets have gone away. So you actually have to go into learning mode or exploration mode to figure it out again. And lo and behold, it's actually what human beings are wired for. We are wired for learning mode. We are born, unlike a deer, a fawn, we're born not able to walk, not able to talk.
It's not
right.
Genetic.
I mean, so we're purely in learning mode. And then, the way our education system is and much of our workforce during the industrial age, we want that driven out of people by the time they're 18 years old.
Right. Well, but that's the industrial age, right? That's the workforce.
Right.
That's the getting people ready for work. But now you really got to get them ready to be more independent, free thinkers, figure it out. We don't just, we're born and as we grow, we just somehow figure out math. It just starts in our head. It's like we can walk. It's not like that. So I think, I think this is an interesting conversation at an interesting time in history. Like really crazy things are happening right now.
Well, what's interesting too is thinking about pre-industrial revolution, everybody was sort of responsible for their economy too. And you had tons of farmers that were independent farmers. You had craftspeople, and there was all sorts of crazy political systems, feudal systems, and all the rest of it.
Crazy stuff.
Often meant that they didn't get to keep their stuff. So crazy stuff. But I think, a couple centuries from now, the industrial, this is why I don't really like calling things first industrial age and second industrial age, because the actual manufacturing, do what you're told, hierarchical command and control is going to be a blip on human history. It's going to be this tiny blip compared to compared to the emerging gig economy and freelancers and everybody becoming responsible for their own economy again, which was before the revolution and now is after the digital revolution. It's going to be that way.
Yeah.
And so all our institutions.
What was the group that was once the industrial age was coming around, all these machines were being invented and it's going to get rid of people, the Luddites or something, that, nobody's going to have jobs anymore. We're not going to work. You got to make clothing. What do you mean we can't? The machine's going to do this. Nobody's going to have a job anymore, and it's kind of the same thing, but it's just shifts. It doesn't go away. We just got to learn new things and do it differently.
It shifts. It's interesting. You talk to economists and they can distinguish between automation that is likely to create net new jobs,
right,
versus automation that will create net fewer jobs.
Right.
And so you can make it part of economic or industrial policy that you're favoring the former versus the latter. And it would be a smart thing to do, because that's actually what's going to, as long as as a society, as long as we're obsessed with growth and everything has to be year over year growth, then you actually have to choose those type of technologies that create the jobs, or then
Right.
you
Don't
really
leave
do have a
people
problem.
behind. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk more about that, because, the theme of this podcast, the reason I started it 3 years ago, I guess, is because of these conversations that I was having with clients. I'm a small business attorney, about, they were accidentally going into business. They were starting up because they're really excited about an idea, but they didn't do the research to figure out if anybody wanted their product, were they going to make any money on the product. I mean, just because it's a great idea doesn't mean it should be a business. I mean, like they don't go hand in hand, so I think a lot of people would skip those steps, and they didn't use the tried and true steps. And those tried and true steps don't have to be like, analysts at McKinsey. You could be an entrepreneur, and you could be not somebody who came out of Harvard Business School, or any other business school for that matter, and still get there. Because I think the whole thing about the lean entrepreneur, and if you've ever read any of Mike Michalowicz's books, The Toilet Paper Entrepreneur, which is way back, one of his early books, it's all about scarcity. It's all about bootstrapping. It's all about figuring out how to do it with less and making more as a result of it, which is a big problem. But maybe we can talk about that.
Yeah, well, so I think that the key insight to those philosophies is that in the digital age, especially, we know we can create the product. There's not a lot of technology risk. And so when people are coming up with new ideas, they're not coming up with ways, new jet propulsion systems. They're coming up with ideas for a new app. And so, but the mentality still is, I need to build the app. I need to prove that I can, build something.
Right.
And that's going to be, and then everybody will come and buy it because it's such a great idea. But we know that we can build it. It's not where the risk is. And a matter of fact, we know how we can build it in such a way that people can afford it. So there's really not an operational risk. We know we can outsource it. We know how to, it's not necessarily cheap, and we don't want to build cheap stuff, but it's known. It's not an unknown. There's not uncertainty around it.
Right.
So the question then becomes, well, should we build it?
Right.
And so the whole idea around using the word lean is that lean means it's reducing waste as much as possible. It doesn't mean necessarily bootstrapping, or necessarily not spending money, or necessarily being small. It means being physically fit. It means being muscular.
Like
if
smart
you want to
about
be
it.
muscular, and you're smart about it, you're eliminating the waste. So fat is waste. You're eliminating the fat. And so what you want to do really is, and again, the other huge benefit of this is that you can start these as side hustles, and you don't have to leave your job to go do it.
Right.
But you're out there validating the idea. You're actually busting your own assumptions. You're cutting through your own biases in order to create market-based evidence that you have something that you ought to be working on.
Right.
And you're setting your milestones such that you're getting investments, whether it's your own money or somebody else's, based upon continued learning, based upon achieving milestones that are indicating that you're progressing towards success.
Right.
And so this is the other really big challenge inside of businesses.
Huge challenge. Everyone does it the opposite. They got shiny object syndrome.
They not only have shiny objects, but they want to focus on what they're doing instead of what is the impact of what they're doing. Right. So it's all task management. I'm going to put all my to-do lists on a list.
Right.
And that's how I measure my productivity, as opposed to, well, wait a second, what's the outcome supposed to be for all of those things that I'm doing? Is that outcome actually happening? Like it's classic in the big enterprises, right? Well, I was on time and under budget. Yeah, but nobody bought the product.
Right. Nobody bought the thing.
You didn't.
That wasn't my responsibility, right? Well, but it's like you said, there's no risk on that side. People don't like risk. They don't like failure, and sometimes it's better what they don't know. They don't want to know. They don't want to lift up the veil and say, "Oh,
but that's actually higher risk, right?
Much higher risk. I can't tell you how many people come to me and their business is failing, and they have this seemingly let's not call it great, seemingly interesting product or concept or service. And I'm like, well, let's take a look at your business plan or your strategic plans or your marketing analysis. And they don't have any of it. Well, I asked a lot of people. It really turns out they asked like 6 of their best friends. And that's not market research. And the ones I've met, I'm sure you have too, on the podcast, off the podcast, for clients that are consistently successful in business, do what you say. They're not on the other side building it. They know they can do that, but they have to fix it, test it, break it, make sure people want it first, because even though they know they can build it, they may still build it wrong. Right? What people really want and what you think they want doesn't match up. It rarely matches up. So I think that is like the key to success in business, is doing it the way you said. You got to climb that wall first. Forget about all the stuff. If you have a concept, great. Draw a picture. Don't do anything more than that. Research the market.
Listen, I didn't invent this stuff.
No, I know that.
I didn't invent this. And so I'm just saying, I totally admit it. We came up with all of these things, the different people that were writing about this, by looking at the startups that were successful and how they operated.
Right.
And it was test.
Yeah.
And don't believe your own BS. Don't believe your own assumptions. And
we're comfortable with their own BS. Data. Makes them feel good.
Right. Well, and listen, we joke about it, but it's scary and it's hard. I've had my own ideas that I don't want to go test my assumptions, because I don't want somebody to tell me my baby's ugly.
Right.
So if if you don't ask people,
you're just going to fail anyway. So what does it matter? I don't know if people look, Brant, I think that if people, and I agree with you, these concepts and these processes have been around. You didn't invent them. I didn't invent them, which begs the question of why. So why is business success failure so high? It's because people don't do it. They don't get the books. They don't read about it. They don't test it. They're afraid to find out what the real answer is, I think. Subconsciously.
Right. I agree with you, but it's also, I think it does really go back to the myth of the visionary. I mean, so the media and successful entrepreneurs want to tell the story that it was all about them. Right.
Yeah.
So it's really kind of crazy in our society, the people that we hold up as being the most amazing people. Jeff Zuckerberg and
Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. And I just combined them, I guess. Yeah. Elon Musk.
It's the same.
So we want to attribute to them this genius. And a matter of fact, they built very successful companies. Don't get me wrong, but none of it was really like visionary. It wasn't genius. And of course, it's absurd to apply
maybe it was genius because it wasn't visionary.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's true.
Look at Jeff Bezos. Because he just said, I'm just going to sell everything and we're going to start with books.
Right. And then he's got to hustle to win, right? So it comes down to the hustle, not the visionary status.
Right. The hard.
And so it's crazy that we then build these gurus up and then apply. Oh, they must be gurus in politics and all these other things too. That's just insanity. But so that's the myth of the visionary, though, is that we build up these people and we build up this idea that they were all like messing with computer chips. And I mean, it's a hilarious story about like Steve Jobs, like Ross Perot. Remember Ross Perot? He ran for president as an independent, in like 96 or something like that. And he invested in Steve Jobs' second company when he was booted out of Apple. He went to Next and started this company.
Right. Now I remember Next. Yeah.
And Perot invested in that. And Perot literally told this story. He goes like, well, the reason why I invested was because Steve Jobs dropped out of college and he was messing around with computer chips in his garage, and he put his dad brought him in like a wooden crate, and he created the first computer out of this wooden crate in these computer chips.
That's not even a true story, is it?
No, there's nothing true about that story. Like there's like zero.
I know. Didn't Jobs and his group go to like Hewlett Packard or Wang Computer or somewhere where they demoed something that had a mouse or whatever, and the company said, we've been playing around with this. We don't really want it. Do you guys want it? Because we're going to throw it out. And they said, sure.
That was just the user. That was just the user interface, and it was Xerox. But that's a true story.
Okay, yeah, I remember. I read that.
But the way they started, the way they started was like they went to a guy and said, "Hey, we can build you these computer motherboards, and do you want to buy them?" And the guy goes, "Okay, I'll see what you got." And so Steve Wozniak was a technical genius, put together these things, and they like brought over a bag of computer chips to this guy, and the guy's like, "Are you kidding me? No, you go put this stuff together and show me that it works." So it's just like, even that way, it was sort of iterating on trying to figure out what the market
that's real
would bear
life
and stuff like
it's
that.
not, but that doesn't sell well if it's in the movies or in a book.
No, exactly right. But the Isaacson book on Steve Jobs is just genius and tells all those stories. But it just really comes down to it. It's hard. I understand it's hard. I make the mistake still myself. But the idea is to imagine who is your early adopter, who is going to,
your ideal,
if you were going to sell your product in a retail store, who's spending the night out. And it's not necessarily demographics based, right? It doesn't matter what age they are or their gender or their race or their income. It's what is the need that you're addressing that is shared by this community of people. And it's good. It's powerful to imagine it as a community of people. They would all come and maybe they would not like each other outside of this one need that they share, right? So you're imagining who that customer is. And then you're going out into the real world and you're finding as many of them as you can. And you're talking to them, but you're not pitching them your idea. You're not asking them for what features they want. You're not asking them, would you pay for this? Or you're not asking them to predict their own future. Human beings are horrible at predicting their own future. So it takes some skill to learn how to do those interviews, but you can learn it. And there's a bunch of ways to teach it. I've got a courses going up on startupbluebook.com to teach it. There's a bunch of design thinking people that teach it.
You give me a link.
So there's a bunch of, so there's a bunch of ways that these there's ways to learn this. And so it's getting out there and trying to understand these people deeply. It's understanding what drives them, what motivates them, what needs they have, how important those needs are, and understanding what their aspirations are. And you're finding patterns, right? Here's this group of people that seems to have this need and this environment that I can work with. And so that's who I'm going to maybe put them on a customer advisory board. This is who I'm going to go work with.
I love advisory boards. I think a lot of people think they know what their customer likes and wants and needs. The most successful people I know, even in small business, are always questioning that. They never accept, their idea of what the customer is. They want to know from the customer. They test. Even when they come up with a new product and they're tweaking and changing, they ask again. They never stop asking. As a matter of fact, the most successful ones. But people fall into that trap, don't you think? They fall into the trap of believing in their mind, because we're such smart people, that we know what the customer wants. We don't have to ask the customer. I know what they want. This is what they want. And 90% of the time, they're wrong, by the way. Maybe it's more than 90%.
Mitch, I hate to do this, but somebody's ringing my doorbell.
Someone's ringing your doorbell?
Yes.
Well, got to answer the door. Is it somebody you need to get?
Yeah.
Well, that's why we do this live. It's fun.
Okay. All right. 1 sec. I'll be back.
Okay. This will be edited out of the audio version, but not the video. Not the video editing.
Yeah. I'm on a call too, so if you can try to, thanks.
Don't you put a sign like podcast in progress? And don't you put a sign like podcast in progress, do not knock or something? Do not ring bell? Like baby sleeping? Can you hear me? Or did we lose your headset? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Everything had to get reconnected.
Okay. It'll fix in the audio version. That's quite all right. Yeah, I was doing a podcast with a gentleman he's a dentist out in LA to the stars. I forget his name. Dr. Bill Dorfman. Have you heard of him? Dentist. Anyway, in the middle of the podcast, his technical guy comes in to fix like their video screen. I don't know what they were doing. So he's like, "Oh, you'll just edit this out." And they started talking. I said, "I'm not going to edit out of the video." And for like 20 minutes, they were doing stuff and fixing things. And I was like, "I'm fine." And I edited it out of the audio. So we'll edit that out of the audio. The video will just, who cares, right? Because we're having a good conversation anyway. So you all back?
I have an issue still. Hold on.
I can hear you. You can't hear me?
I have music playing.
You hear music? I don't hear music. You're connected to something like someone's phone or right?
My headset's performing all sorts of magic and wanted to go off and play me some Beatles. So I actually
That's
had a
funny.
nice musical interlude there. Yeah,
Okay.
so absolutely insane. I was supposed to get a text and lo and behold, they're going to show up
They just
right
show up.
during.
Well, it's better than not showing up. But I think we're having a good conversation because I think
Yep.
we people need to know, how do you get out of that trap? How do you do it the right way? We'll call you the guru today. No, you don't want to be called the guru.
Right. Yeah. So it's just, I think the most powerful part is admitting when you don't know something.
Yeah.
Right. So that's
100%.
what opens up your ability to go learn and explore. And that's tough. Like you were saying, everybody, no, I understand this. I know it. And
Right.
oftentimes people are solving a problem that they have or a need that they want to address.
Nobody else
But
cares.
yeah, I mean, the research shows that the number one reason why startups fail is because there's not a market for their product.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And then number two reason is premature scaling. And so that means that
Meaning they grow too fast
they grow too fast and they build too much product. And so
and they can't sell it. Got it.
they can't, they found something, which is
Yeah.
great. But especially if you're a startup and you bring on investors, the investors are like, all right, now it's growth mode. And you're like, no, wait a second.
Right.
There's
And then
still
you get
more
a
stuff we have to
warehouse
figure out.
full of stuff and you don't know how to sell it and get it out there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's why a lot of warehouses full of crap.
Right. So as a founder, so there's kind of two stages there. As a founder, if you are just starting out, you have to, okay, what do I not know about my customers? And if I say that I know, then it shouldn't be any problem for me to go find a handful of them. And it's not like you have to we're not going for like statistical significance here.
Right.
You're just trying to find 10 people, and then you're trying to find 25 people, and then you're trying to find 50 people. I had this entrepreneur that I was helping in Madison, Wisconsin. He built an app where you would choose a piece of clothing and hit the shuffle button, and it would finish the wardrobe for you. And I go, okay, sounds cool.
Okay.
How many customers do you have? 0. Well, how can I help you? Well, I want 1,000 customers. Well, that's what he said. And I want 1,000 customers. How many do you have? 0. I go, well, go find one. Find one
Can you
person
get
willing to
100
push.
from the people that he knows? Can you get 100?
Right.
Yeah.
Did they care? Right.
I
So,
guess not.
like,
so what did it do? It took like my shirt, for example, and then it said, oh, you should match this kind of pants, this color shoes, that type of thing. Okay.
Yeah.
It sounds like some people can't pick wardrobes. There are services to pick wardrobes for you. So it sounds like a good concept. What was his problem?
Well, his problem is that he had never talked to customers. And so he maybe
he's
had
an
an
inventor.
app. I don't know. Right. Exactly. So I was like literally telling him he had to go and find one person willing to push the shuffle button.
Okay. That can't be hard.
You would think.
It'd be
The
hard to
streets
find
were
10.
teeming with people.
Yeah. Everyone wears clothes, I think, right? There's not like a nudist colony where he lives and they don't wear clothes. I mean,
I got to pause you again.
That's
I have to
hysterical.
pause you again, Mitch.
Don't lose your headset this time.
Okay.
Gonna really push my audio editing skills.
I try to pause to give you some space to do it, but anyway, this is like this never happens to me. I apologize.
No problem. But you were making a good point.
Right. So go find one, and then who's willing to push that shuffle button, and what is their engagement like? And so observation ends up being a really super powerful way to learn about your customers.
Yeah.
And so a lot of like the people that say, I don't need to talk to my customers, they actually quote people like, Henry Ford, who never really said this. If I had asked people what they wanted, they would have wanted a faster horse. but that isn't even a very good excuse. I mean, if you're an
Right.
entrepreneur, you go, they want to add a faster horse. Well, what if I put a steam engine on a
Yeah. It's how
cart?
you ask the
Right.
question.
Well, and it's what you do with the answer. It's how you come up with the
Right.
answer.
Well, that's true
And the
too.
same thing with there's stories that Steve Jobs would hide in bushes and watch people go in and out and interact inside the Apple store
Not
because he
true.
wanted to learn.
Right? Did he?
I don't know if that one's
No.
true or not.
That
He
makes
kind of
more
seems like
sense.
he kind of seems like that. He might be that kind of guy actually,
Right.
or what would have been that kind of guy. But he also, to me, he understood his market segment very deeply. So it was that same sort of thing that I'm thinking about community, right? He used to say people want stuff that works. They want elegant solutions that just work.
Yeah.
And so those are the people that he hired. He had thousands of his customers in his offices. So they didn't necessarily have to go out and interview a bunch of random people. They were all right there.
Yeah.
And this is an advantage of a lot of consumer oriented big brands could be doing that they don't necessarily do very well, is their customers are actually inside their walls. There's absolutely no
Yeah. They have
excuse not to
enough to,
understand.
right. Yeah. They don't have to go
Yep.
out to the world. They have them right there.
Right. So it's more challenging for startup entrepreneurs, and it's more challenging. Now we're finally getting post-pandemic, you can get out of the building again, during
Right.
Zoom calls. That was kind of tough. But it's really just imagining who your ideal customer is and then going out in the real world and understanding the context. What are the needs that you're addressing? So why are they choosing this product? You can use
Right.
competitors' products to run experiments. You can do all sorts of analogies out there in the marketplace. Why are they trying to address this need? And what is the environment around addressing that need? What else has to be in place for you to be able to put a new product in, right? So all products and services are asking people to change their behavior. So this is why it's hard. This is
Right.
why starting a business is hard. You're asking people to change their behavior, and human beings don't really change their behavior very often.
No, we
And they
like it.
don't do it. They don't do it just because of rationality, right? We all do things that we know are unhealthy or not the right things for us, and we do
Yeah.
them, and they're habits, and it's hard to break. And so every product or service is asking people to change their behavior. So the more you learn about what's going to drive that behavior change, that actually is
Easier
your
it's going to
competitive.
be. Yeah.
Yeah, it's your competitive differentiation. It matters more than the technology. So I don't know if you do intellectual property work. So sorry if you
A
do,
little
but
bit.
the intellectual property stuff is like not that important in most
No, it's
startups
not.
and small businesses.
No.
It's
Look,
the
I get people come
insights
to me,
into the
Brant, all the
customer.
time. They're like, well, I gotta file a patent. Well, I'm not a patent attorney. And the trademark, I got to trade. I go,
Oh, the
listen,
trademark. Oh,
maybe you should let's make it work and get your business successful, and we'll deal with that later on. I don't,
right.
you're gonna go out and spend, $10,000 doing all this stuff just to file 27 trademarks. And then you're gonna go to patent attorney and spend 50 grand on a provisional patent and then find out nobody gives a shit. Excuse the expression.
Right. Well, what's funny too
Don't
is like
care.
if you look at most tech startups, the ones that are backed by investors and venture capitalists, none of them have TMs on their logos or because they
Right.
know all of that stuff changes. None of that stuff matters until you get product market fit.
Right.
And so, Airbnb spent a gazillion dollars with their new logo and their tagline and stuff, but it was way after they were very successful.
Yeah.
And so I even try to address this in my startup blue book courses, is that, just by making it live, you're protected.
Yeah. Use protects you. Use in
Yes.
commerce and common, have it around more and more and more. Improve. There is common law protection of your work, of trademarks.
Yep.
You don't have to be registered. It gives you more protection, but it
Yep.
doesn't somebody could just steal it. It doesn't work that way.
Yep. And the other part I always point out, and this is especially true with patents, the intellectual property side of, the patent side, is
Yeah.
what are you going to do if somebody steals it?
Well, that's another
Right.
problem, right? I mean, you can't, you don't have the
Better
money
have
to
some
sue
pretty
them.
deep
You
pockets.
barely have the money to get the patent.
Right.
Look, if you got some proven concept, you're going on Shark Tank and these guys got a lot of money. They want to know if you have a patent, they can protect the patent. There's divisions of Microsoft and all these other companies that buy patents just so they can go and enforce them and so forth. It's a whole industry, but people just, I think that small business owners, you can't imagine how many small business owners I've met. They got boxes of stuff that they've invented, created, had made, whatever. they're still figuring out why these people, what's not being bought. They don't really understand their customer. They'll tell you what their ideal client profile is, let's call it, right? Avatar.
But it's
I don't
mostly
really
based
love
on
that word.
demographics, though.
Or it's based on what they think. Like they didn't come up with it anyway. It's just their opinion.
Right.
It's who they want to.
Well, so
That's how I look at it. It's who they want to sell to, not who
Right.
necessarily is going to buy the product.
Well, what's funny is the first answer is usually everyone, and then when you
Right,
start
it's a
drilling down
stupid
into
answer.
it, then-
Right. You go out of business selling to everyone. I go out of
Listen,
business to providing legal services to anyone. No, I gotta be niched.
my target market is 7 billion people, and I conservatively estimate that I'm going to get 1% of that.
Yeah, and
So
that's
my
good,
target
right?
market is $700 million annually. Yeah, no, it's funny.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah, so that's the. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I was just saying it's recognizing data. I just had a guy on my podcast. The episode's not even out yet, and their company makes wireless cameras. So it was originally made for hunting, right? So let's say they're a Canadian company. So you're up in Canada, right? There's no internet, there's no power. And what these guys would do, they would put these cameras out, they're battery operated, that had these little SD cards, right? And then they would have to go around to all of their sites and collect the SD cards and put them in the computer and see and watch the video and see if a bear walked by yeah, it's ridiculous.
Right.
You might as well just sit there, right? And pee in your underwear. So, but I'm not a big hunter. So, and this guy invented this camera that was solar based and also could access, was wireless with through, you can get internet service, just pay for internet service for the camera, right? So now this data, so then these two guys, he knew them, he came on board, they brought him on for sales, whatever. They knew nothing about cameras. They knew nothing about technology. They were finance guys, they were marketing guys. They started noticing that there was this very small group of people that were buying these cameras, but were not hunters because they were only selling them at hunting stores. Like even at Target, it was in the hunting section. It was in the hunting and fishing section. So they started analyzing the data and they started doing research. They started talking to people, running focus groups, talking to everybody. And they realized that there was a much bigger market and use for this device than just hunting. People would use it at plants and big industrial sites where they didn't have internet yet. They didn't have power. And, it brought their business literally, Brant, from like 15 million sales to 150 million in sales. And they started raising capital. Now they're a $200 million company. Because he brought in these guys that knew nothing about what he did. They were not inventors.
Right.
They didn't know anything. And he says, yeah, well, we were just friends with them. And they said, well, can you make figure out a better way for us to make the cameras faster? Because I'm getting all these extra orders. But it's paying attention to your customer and the data and what's going on. I thought it was an interesting case study.
It is interesting. And what's interesting about it is that you're actually bringing in people that, like you said, they don't know. Right. And so again, they have to go explore.
And they're going to say,
And
why
so
is that happening? He never even noticed it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So the other thing that businesses mistake that is like founders, even if they've got a little bit of traction, they start hiring people that are like them.
Yeah.
As opposed to people that
Big
are
time.
different than them.
Right.
And so the bringing in people that are different, like in the example that you just showed,
Yeah.
is actually what enables you to go figure out something new. If you bring in people that are just like you, then you're trying to double down and execute only on what is known. And so what you need to do is understand, okay, this is the known part. We should automate this or give it to lower paid, lower skilled people that can, execute this blueprint. But then I need this other team, or me, especially the founders responsible is, what is the next step? Where's the uncertainty? What is keeping us from growing to the next level? I don't know. Okay, we have to go figure it out. And I have to bring in people that will help me figure that out.
Right, because they saw something that he didn't see. And the funny thing is, he brought them on. I still forget why, because he needed to create a better product line in terms of being able to make the product faster than they were making it. And they started developing, but they weren't engineers. These guys had no technical background.
I'm wondering if he wanted to bring in people that would market and sell to hunters better. And so
yeah, that was
he was
part
all
of
like,
it. Yeah.
I'll bring in the sales and the marketing people, and they don't know hunters, but they can learn that. And instead what they did is learned that there was all this other opportunity.
Huge, right? Exactly. And his brother was the finance guy. So they brought him in and started looking at these numbers and say, well, this doesn't make any sense. Because they could tell where these things were being used because of the because it had GPS on it and the internet, it was using the cellular
Right.
service. They could tell that it was not in a hunting site. And then they started looking into where is it?
Well, so that's another great point though, right there, is that the metrics that you're tracking are super important. And that metric was a win there,
Yeah,
right? So
they
what
had
I try
access
to
to
teach
data.
people, what I teach people is that, so you've got your group of people now and you get them the minimum viable product. And so that it's not the fully finished product, but you're starting to put it out into those first 25, 50 customers.
Yeah.
You need to hypothesize, how are they going to use the product in order to get value out of it that I've promised them?
Okay.
Right. So if you're using the hunter model, well, we should see it out in these particular areas, and we should see that it's active, so many hours a day. We should see that it's actually shooting at night because that's when the animals come out, or whatever it is. I'm just spitballing there.
No, they had data analytics.
Right. But it's not like business intelligence. It's not like,
no,
I need to look at reams of data. It's a hypothesis of, this is how the product's going to be used. And then looking at the data and determining, is the product being used this way?
That's exactly
and if the
what
answer
they did.
is no,
Right.
If the answer is no,
then the next question is why?
Right. It's got to be different customers, or our metric was wrong, or the product's not working. And so there's really only three possibilities, and you can go figure that out. And suddenly, just because you hypothesize that metric, you've learned. Like these guys opened up a whole
10
new
times.
Market.
They couldn't keep up with
So
the
then
growth.
what you have to do with that metric is, okay, this is our hunter metric, and then this is our industrial site metric, and then this is, whoever else, the agriculture metric.
Right.
And so you're actually figuring out the different use patterns and different use cases. And when I create personas for those different markets, I'm actually describing who they are, what their behaviors are, what their characteristics are that are unique to the circumstance of the way that product's being used. And now the powerful thing about that, Mitch, is that you can go to the engineering team and go like, okay, this is Rod from the industrial site. We're building this feature for him.
Right.
Oh, this is Mitch from the agricultural site. We're building this product for him. And so your engineers now are engineering solutions to problems and needs that specific people have, rather than this kind of general guess of what might be needed out there.
Yeah, these guys and these marketing guys were smart. They recognized that we need to start a new product line, because I don't want to go out and try and convince people at a commercial site that they should be buying a camera that's used in hunting. So it was basically, I think it's basically the same product. So they started a new product, several product lines, different brand names, right? So then, because you're not going to buy the product that's Cabela's, for hunting, you want to buy the product that's used on the industrial site or for security purposes or whatever. And they took what was the company at the time and basically spun it off into a product line, and then started these other products and formed a bigger company, which is now I don't know if it's a public company, but they've raised, $150 million. That was when they needed to scale, right? Because now they knew that the demand was there. And if they built it right, the demand would go up 4, 5, 6, 20 fold or whatever. That's the right time to raise capital. They had been resisting it for a long time, but it's a very interesting case study, because not everybody has a product that gives you direct access and allows you to gather data into your system like that. You have to go out and you have to do it. Yeah. So I'm not saying you can't do it, Brant. I'm saying you got to hit the streets and you got to pick up the phone and you got to connect with people. They had the data right in front of them. They had a big advantage.
It's one of the powers of the digital revolution and the Internet of Things and all that, is that we are getting access to a lot of these products. But you're exactly right. I mean, the ideal way is being able to get it from the product. But if not, there are other analogies that you use. Like, for example, if you're selling contact lenses, are people continuing to buy the fluids and, the cleaning solutions or whatever? Or I guess contact lenses are now almost a subscription model. But the point is that even if you have retail products, if you have physical retail products, you need to invent ways of measuring engagement. And so that's like social media is one way to measure engagement. Or you have online forums or things where people talk about their use of the product or problems with their product. You're offering support, not only because you have to offer support, but also because you can measure engagement.
Yeah, the data. Right. Sure. You're not going to do a
Right.
focus group
So you,
just in Iowa. You want to do it all over the country.
right. So
Yeah.
the point being is that with the digital revolution, you can invent ways that are digital that measure engagement even with an analog product.
Yeah. Do you think a lot of small business owners don't get it when it comes to the use of social media for those kind of purposes, interacting and engaging with their customers?
Yeah, I
The
mean,
small business guy.
I think they're getting better year over year, but it's taken a long time. I mean, Facebook and all the rest have been around for ages. So I think that those companies that are born in the digital world tend to understand all of that digital stuff. So some of the older
Millennials,
ones with
yeah,
the
the
older
kids.
products, it's a little bit more
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
son, you probably know what this is. When my son comes back, he just graduated college, but he's at the engineering school at Indiana. He comes back to his dad. I'm switching my major. I'm going to major in informatics. You've heard of informatics?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I was like, well, what kind of bullshit major is that? I'm not letting you switch from business to some BS thing, marketing. You're just going to let, and I got on the phone with with the advisor or somebody in the department. He goes, no, we're one of the top 5 programs in the country. And this is what it is. And he explained it to me. I said, well, that makes sense. It's all data analytics and everything like that. And he's got a great job now in Indiana with an AI company. But
Nice.
he gets it when it
Awesome.
comes to, when it comes to all this stuff and building technology and doing stuff. But I think people have to, take the time to learn. Look, I'll be honest with you. For 6 or 7 years, I was on LinkedIn. I didn't even know what the hell to do with it. I'm like, why am I even doing this? I have a profile. My friends had to set it up. And good advisor to me passed away about 6-7 months ago. And he would say, you got to get on LinkedIn. That's how you connect. It's all networking. I'm like, what? How am I going to network? And then I started realizing that, wait, when I connect with Brant, I also connect with all the people in his circle. And then when I introduce him to somebody else, he connects with people in those circles. And I started realizing when people were reaching out to me, how did they reach out? Oh, because they're connected with you. And it clicked. A little stupid.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, LinkedIn especially is one that works pretty darn well in that way. It's maintained its focus to a certain degree more than say like a YouTube, I think, or a Facebook has.
Yeah, very networking oriented. So
Right.
I know we've been on for a while, and you're probably going to get a ring at your doorbell again soon. But I wanted to wrap this up kind of with advice from you. If you're a small business owner and you're a little lost and you're not sure about what you're doing, where do you get started? What kind of things you should do to get back on the right track of figuring out your business better?
Well, so I think that one of the traps that founders run into is that they believe that nobody else can do the sort of the technical part, whatever. It's not necessarily really technical, but whatever the value prop is that is being delivered, a lot of founders will believe that they're the only ones capable of doing that.
Right.
And that's okay, but you're not going to grow.
Right.
You're limiting your growth.
The E-myth, right?
Right. And so you really need to pass on what you've learned to other people. And the tough part about that is they are not going to be able to do it at the same level that you can do it.
Which is okay.
And so,
right.
Which is okay. You have to be okay with it. Your customer still has to be happy. So it even kind of comes back with your ability to measure the satisfaction of your customers to ensure that once you're passing it off, that your customers are still loyal and satisfied and passionate and all those type of things.
Yeah.
But the job of what you're doing then is I'm in explore mode. So once I've passed off that stuff, then I want to ask myself, where's the bottleneck in my growth? And so in my book, The Lean Entrepreneur, I have 7 states that a customer goes through from becoming aware to becoming passionate. Okay. And it's guaranteed. So it's aware. I've heard of the product. It's intrigued. I think the messaging for the product is speaking to me and it's my needs that I have. And then I become trusting because I believe that this product will be right and I can trust the company that they're able to deliver. I become convinced and I buy. And then I go through this period of hopeful that I hope I made the right decision and I need to get that value prop I was promised. Satisfied, I'm getting the value prop because how I'm using the product is fulfilling the promise that was made to me. And then passion is sort of this bigger aspirational journey that we're on together, the customer and the company. And that could be, I don't know, Tom's shoes, giving shoes to shoeless people, or Zappos giving shoes to people, or it doesn't necessarily have to be philanthropic, but that is one way that brands sort of build that passion.
Sure.
So your bottleneck, founder, your bottleneck is somewhere in those 7 states. And so you have to be able to evaluate the data or talking to the customers, try to figure out if I optimize this conversion from, say, aware to intrigued, or from trusting to convinced, then I'm going to see revenue growth.
Yeah, you should.
And right. And so that's one way to figure out new growth. Or it could be, we've nailed this market and I want to see more growth. So what do I need to do? I need to build new products for that existing market, or I
Yeah.
need to say, where can I take this product into adjacent markets? So what's a market that's similar to the one that I have now, but different enough that I maybe have to tweak the product and I have to tweak the messaging. I have to tweak what that intrigued statement is.
Right.
And my persona is going to be different. So those are all exploration modes of things. Those are getting back to when you first started and I don't know, you're admitting when you don't know. And so you're going off and exploring, how do I get to that next level of growth? So it can be very systematic and be very disciplined approach, which is what I think successful business owners are like.
Yeah.
And so
They don't go
coming
with
up
their
with
gut,
this,
just wing it.
right. It's coming up with that system again. Okay, now I need to be in exploration mode. I've got people that are covering my existing business.
Right.
So now I need to be in exploration mode and figure out what's the next way to advance. So yeah, that would be my advice if that's helpful.
No, very helpful. And I'm sure they can get a lot of that in your book, right? In the Lean
Yeah, the
Entrepreneur.
Lean Entrepreneur in particular. Yep.
Okay, good. We'll put a link in the show notes to the book, and you have a disrupting book too, right? That disruption.
Right. So disruption proof is geared, a little bit more for bigger companies or fast growing companies. And it's really about how to structure and manage work differently in the digital age.
Okay.
So it's not, if you're digitizing your product line or you're going into digital, then I think that it's a relevant book. And it's all of the things that we've talked about today, Mitch, is that the whole management command and control of the industrial revolution is over, and we're still using those management techniques. And so I think that we have to structure companies differently so that the natural behavior is more of this exploration mode that we've been talking about.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. We probably could do a whole episode how to change our entire educational system and teach our kids like it's not 1945 anymore, but they learn as they get older and they grow up in the digital age. So Brant, I can't thank you enough. I know you said you're in San Diego, which is a beautiful town. So you're better off than, although it's sunny here today, which is good.
And it's not sunny where I am. So
oh, it's not today.
No.
Yeah. So our rain passed. We had some big rain for a couple of days, but I appreciate your time and joining me here. And let's definitely stay in touch. I want to keep sharing good thoughts and good helpful ideas for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. I appreciate that. And I encourage your listeners to reach out to me. I'm Brant at brantcooper.com and Brant Cooper on all social media. And I do respond. So people should reach out. And I apologize for those interruptions today, Mitch.
That's okay. We'll put all those links in the show notes
great
too.
conversation.
So people can,
yeah.
if somebody's driving, they're listening to the episode, they don't have to stop and write it down. But I appreciate you, being open to people reaching out to you. So a lot of people do. So I thank you again.
All right. Thank you.